2 hours before sunset, Xander made his way back through the boughs to the breadfruit tree. Valentine was executing a search pattern around the trunk. Xander's interest perked. There was definitely more to the mutt than advertised. Xander quietly maneuvered down to a wide limb, which offered an unrestricted view of the flabby red boxer, then sprawled on it and watched the dog as he continued circling the tree. After 22 laps, that Xander was there to observe, Valentine took 2 paces away from the trunk, and nose to the grass, started another larger circle. 10 laps later, Valentine again took 2 paces away, and began sniffing the next larger circle. Xander lost interest in the fruitless search, so took the opportunity to study the harbor from his concealed vantage point, paying particular attention to sea paws and the area where the thin troop of dogs had gone. Long past the point where any other cat would have confronted the snoop, Xander waited. He wanted to see how far Valentine would go. Suddenly Valentine gave a dreadful yelp, yanked his nose out of the grass and began running in tight, frantic circles yelling something about a bee. A moment later, he dashed into some nearby shrubbery and his howls of pain seemed to get farther away, but Xander knew how easy it was to modulate sound and trick opponents, so he made a big production of standing up, arching his back and yawning, as if he had just awakened from his afternoon siesta. Casually, he sheathed half his claws and descended the tree trunk with as many clumsy slips and grabs as possible. Then, he awkwardly slipped the last 2 feet and landed in an undignified plop. A sneak peek confirmed that Valentine's attention was on him, so he stayed in the undignified position for 50 heartbeats before staggered to his paws and began a lurching walk toward Whispering Winds. After several steps, he tripped over his own paws and sat down hard. He made an inelegant effort at cleaning his fur and pretended to notice Valentine, who was lurking behind a pink hibiscus bush. Xander feigned surprise because it never hurt to make the enemy think he was clumsy. "What are you doing here?" Xander widened his eyes and looked up at the branches, as if embarrassed. "Been there long?" "No." Valentine took a step forward. "Heard some yelling, came to see what was going on." "Yelling, huh? That must be what woke me up." Xander yawned. Sounded like someone had died. He licked his paw and smoothed the fur on his face. Valentine stood up, then moved a step forward, but stopped when he was half under the bush, half in front, which looked totally stupid. He realized he wasn't the only one putting on an act to appear dumber than he actually was. Xander avoided looking at the swelling sting on the icky black nose and continued grooming himself. "Do you think we should look for whoever was yelling? I heard they have some demon thing called a chupacabra that kills things." He tried to look frightened as he glanced around the area. "Do you think this place is safe?" The dog puffed up with importance. "It's just you and me, now. So no chupacabra?" Valentine shook his head so hard that great drops of spittle sprayed the area. "Just checking to make sure you're okie dokie." Xander stood up, stretched and yawned before he replied. "I feel better than I have in ages. Must have been the great nap I had." He gave another huge yawn, then sat down as if the only thing he wanted to do was chat with a red mutt. "You should try it sometime. There's simply nothing as relaxing as swaying on a sun-drenched branch with birds singing. Don't you get enough of that living on a sailboat? It's not the same at all." Valentine looked at him as if he was daft. "No leaves, no bark, and the birds definitely aren't the same." Not that there were many birds in the Bahamas. Valentine wasn't the only one gifted at playing stupid. He got to his paws and began walking toward the boat, making certain to walk like a drunken sailor. Valentine fell into step beside him. "Do you think chupacabras kill cats?" "Never heard of one." "Well, they sound dangerous, but I've never heard of one climbing trees." Xander stumbled, then pretended to clumsily catch his balance on shaky legs. "Have you listened to those birds with the yellow tummies? Very nice song. Not as lovely as the osprey in the Chesapeake, but lovely just the same." "You're just saying that to distract me from the chick you were up that tree with." Reggae music drifted over the harbor, mingling scents of squalid dog, peppery chicken, moist soil and ganja. Except for the chicken, the country stench mirrored everything he'd observed on sea paws. Perhaps that was one reason his would-be pal, Spy, seemed so at ease. Valentine, Xander said gravely as he stumbled onto the dock, I assure you that I was not, nor have I ever been up a tree with a chicken. His tail twitched. Next thing you'll be telling me is that I spent the day in a tree with a shark. That's stupid. Xander raised a brow. Is it? His tail twitched harder. I think it'd be a fascinating way to spend a day. He'd never realized how amusing it was to watch dogs squirm. Okay, I'll be serious. Since I know you know that sharks don't climb trees, I confess that I was up there with shark bait. You're weird and I'm going back to my boat. Was it something I said? He asked, but Valentine left without responding. Xander tripped his way back home, then gave himself a high five as he leapt aboard Whispering Winds. After making certain no other dogs were in a position to see into the cabin and no sort of surveillance equipment had come aboard during his absence, he checked his email. Fluffy had sent a photo of herself modeling her new pink, diamond-studded collar, which contained an amazing array of technology, which allowed her to access data no matter where she was. Xander had a blue version, which matched his eyes. Though diamonds were part of the technology, he could not imagine wearing all that sparkly stuff. Fortunately, the Research and Development Division had made his collar with gems that looked like sapphires. There were only 12 collars with the advanced technology. Now, he, Merlin and Fluffy each had one because they were chief protectors of a large geographical area. However, Catamondo's R&D division had made certain that cheap knockoffs flooded the market, so the dogs would not be able to pick out the protectors simply by looking at their collars. Xander quickly wrote Fluffy a note of congratulating her for her new collar. Merlin wrote that he'd given into his sister's begging and had agreed to give Cha-Cha parasailing lessons. The Purrsident was on the cover of the online version of Cat Lovers magazine. Cha-Cha wrote that Merlin was the most stubborn chauvinistic cat she'd ever met, but the good news was that she'd finally gotten through his thick skull. The bad news was that he had put her into a training class for 6-week-old kittens. Simon confessed that he wasn't one bit closer to solving the catnapping than he had been when he had advised LM about the situation. It was beginning to look like the catnapping would never get solved unless he personally got involved. Since seeing Sea Paws enter the harbor, Xander had become certain Dame Esmeralda's catnapping was part of one of Dogdom's sinister plots. He needed to figure out what Dogdom was up to so he could effectively counter their scheme. Unfortunately, by now the clues had become muddled either by time or Simon's bungling, so no matter what he did, it would probably be impossible to fully analyze the situation as it had unfolded from the beginning. Therefore, he needed to step out of the cat box and find a different way to solve the situation. To take his mind off his problems, he reopened the photo Fluffy had attached to her message. Who's the one with the gaudy pink and glitz collar? Xander whirled shocked that Sharky had managed to sneak up on him for the third time in 8 hours. No other cat had ever managed to accomplish such a feat. A friend. Sharky sniffed with disdain. How come she looks so pleased about wearing an emblem of slavery? His own blue collar suddenly felt snug, so he stretched his neck. Sharky's attention never wavered from the screen. Pink with diamonds is so tacky. Xander thought it looked wonderful peeking out from the long tresses of her gorgeous gray fur. Unsure of Sharky's real motives for meeting him, when he docked and uncertain how well she could keep a confidence, Xander did not dare to tell her that only a dozen cats had collars equal to the technology packed into Fluffies and that they were collars of honor, not slavery. His own dignified sapphire-studded collar was built using the most powerful technology available, and due to the remote areas he often found himself in, even included a satellite link. He studied the little black and white gal, recalling how stealthy she was and the way dogs seemed to ignore her. Could she be a double agent? His ears flattened before he could stop them. Was she baiting him to reveal the secrets of Catamondo's most secret technology? He shrugged, as if Fluffy's collar was of no consequence. It makes her happy. Then, he looked away from the computer and casually sniffed the air. Say, do you know where they're cooking that chicken? She inclined her head in the affirmative. Think they'd miss a couple pieces? Her eyes widened. What are you suggesting? You, me, dinner. She sat down with a thump. You want to be seen in public with me? Is there a problem with that? I mean, we've just spent a lovely day together. She apparently didn't know what to think. Look, I'm tired of dry kibble and that chicken smells too good to pass up. She stared at him. Do you have a problem against getting some? He allowed his question to trail off, then remained silent hoping she'd find her voice. Sharky sniffed the air. It's jerk. Well, it smells like chicken to me. He sniffed, again. Haven't heard of jerk, but it sure smells like bird, and bird of any sort is my personal favorite. Turkey, chicken, even duck, whatever. I'm certain jerk will taste as good as it smells. She giggled. Jerk is a peppery seasoning that can burn your tongue. They put it on everything, even that chicken you're smelling. Ah, so it is chicken with spices. He smiled. If it's too hot, any added flavor on the outside can be taken off. He casually flicked a claw and shut down his email program. With another flick, he concealed his direct link to Catamondo's files. Then, he stood up and stretched. How about it? Are you going to have dinner with me, or shall I simply follow my nose? Sharky headed for the door. So, what's your favorite food? He asked as they leapt in tandem to the dock. Fish. He thought about the flying fish that he often found on deck. Interesting flavor, but way too much effort for what you get. What do you mean? She looked serious. Bones. Scales. I've never noticed any. Have you ever had an overnighter? Are they some sort of North American type? As they strolled down the dock, he described the big-eyed fish that frequently lay dead on the deck in the morning. Her nose twitched with the slightest disdain. I've never seen anything like that at the dock. Things with eyes on twigs, things with snapping claws, fish with huge razor teeth. Yes, but what you're talking about sounds more like bait. He ducked under a thick-leaved vine covered with bunches of white trumpet-shaped flowers. You really shouldn't go near that stephanotis when you're tracking dinner. He looked back at her. Why not? Its strong smell overpowers everything else. No matter, he said, as if he didn't understand her point. It's lovely in here and you know where we're going. The startled bird let out a thunderous squawk and flapped his glistening black wings as he lunged at him. Xander leapt to the side, allowing the bird to charge past him, directly at Sharky. Instead of jumping to the side, she leapt upward as if propelled by a rocket. The bird shrieked as it shot underneath her and then skidded to a stop. Quick, up that tree, Xander said. Before the rooster could collect itself, he was halfway to the first branch, Sharky close on his tail. You know they can fly, she said as she leapt onto the lowest limb and ducked out of the bird's view. True, but they don't like to beat their wings against hard surfaces. He patted the wide branch they'd taken refuge on. Ah, she watched the rooster spin around, looking for them. When its glistening black tail was toward them, she sprinted to a section where the branches were denser. It's ironic, don't you think? The bird's beady black eyes peered upward. What is? He asked as he waited for the bird to lose interest. Getting trapped up a tree by a chicken when we'd intended to eat one for dinner. You think we're trapped? She gave him a blank look. He gestured to the way the branches interconnected with the next tree and the next and onward, until those of a wide-leaved tree laid on a convenient roof. After this morning, I thought you'd realize that when we're in a tree, we have options only available to a few special species. Beneath them, the rooster squawked and scratched angrily at the dirt, providing an excellent distraction for any spying canine. Shall we? Without waiting for a reply, he set off, taking a route that kept the trunk between him and the dog-inhabited mangroves. It didn't take long to get to the corrugated steel roof. Once there, he moved swiftly across the exposed expanse of sun-warmed metal to the edge, which overlooked the town's main street. Xander lay on his stomach and peered down at the narrow, potholed road, which barely had space for two vehicles to pass. Thin cracked sidewalks and reeking slime-filled gutter were on either side of the pitiful road. Can't you figure out how to get down? Of course. He flicked an ear toward the thick wooden electrical post that someone had set in the middle of the sidewalk. I'm wondering why you're the only cat I've seen here. And he was wondering if Port Antonio is some sort of special canine commune. From this vantage point, he counted 14 dogs separating him from the tantalizing aroma of jerk chicken. The good thing about the dogs was that each one acted like a lazy reject. The bad thing was that at least two were obviously mothers and everyone knew not to come between a mother and her pups, but the worst thing was that he couldn't see any pups. There sure are a lot of dogs here, he said. They seem to be everywhere, don't they? He nodded. It explained why a lone cat would be forced by circumstances to join in an unholy alliance with the enemy. The dogs have an academy around here or something, he asked casually. The last thing he needed was for Whispering Winds to be docked next to a training center, especially when he might need to go away from his ship for a few days. Clive usually has a lot of puppies, but I've never noticed many anywhere else. Xander tried to look like he was merely chatting about a casual topic. Who or what is Clive? The Rastaman, who lives there. She pointed to the mangrove-covered area where Valentine had first spoken to the thin dogs. His attention narrowed on the grove, but he was too far away to see anything the dogs didn't want seen. That area was something he'd have to investigate after he sorted out Simon's situation. Clive goes around looking for lost or abandoned puppies, then he takes them back on that. Sharky indicated an odd flat thing fashioned with long circular yellowish pipes of varying diameter, each half in the water. A green plastic stacking bin was attached to the wider end. A similar yellow rod lay across its narrowest end. He'd read about the narrow bamboo rafts that Jamaicans used to navigate rivers, but this was the first he'd seen. Weird raft, he muttered. It's typical. You're kidding. She shook her head. They're traditional. Humans even have pictures of them in those brochures asking exorbitant amounts to give tourists river rides. Humans pay for the strangest things, he said. You're one to talk. He raised a brow. Don't give me that innocent look, Sharky sputtered. Most cats don't choose to live on boats. He didn't respond to her comment, or admit that the move had promoted him from Eastern U.S. Purrtector to become the first Sea Purrtector, which was Catamondo's largest protectorate. Sharky walked toward the telephone pole, leapt across the narrow expanse and started down. The dogs lounging near the street didn't appear to react. Either they were the most highly trained dogs he'd ever observed, or they actually were totally lazy. He doubted the later, which renewed his suspicions about Sharky's motives for befriending him. Had her delight at meeting him and her extravagant compliments masked the fact she was an agent for the enemy? Or was she simply a lone cat caught in the middle of a dog-infested town, who was eager for feline company? It could be either, but until he knew for certain, he needed to exercise caution. As he followed her down the slippery pole to the grimy street, the stench thickened. Once he got to the broken concrete, Xander gave as much attention to where he stepped as he did to observing the dogs, who gave every appearance of ignoring him. Hather, but their training is good, he muttered. Beware of the man who does not talk, and the dog that does not bark. Before he could ask Sharky what she meant by the odd statement, she darted to her right, entering a narrow, twisting alley, and then she ducked through a crack in a crumbling wall to her left. She suddenly paused behind the protection of a rusty barrel. Continuing the clumsy act, in case any dogs were watching, he bumped into her. Sorry, he whispered. The air around them smelled so strongly of chicken that he wondered if simply breathing could make a body gain weight. If so, it could explain why some of the dogs appeared fat. But it didn't explain why so many were thin as rails. Intense training might explain that, though. White or dark? Sharky asked. He studied her black and white fur. Breast or thigh? He blinked in confusion. Chicken meat, which type do you like best? Xander assumed a dignified look. I said I was taking you to dinner. It was fun to disorient her, and strange to realize how little time she'd probably spent with other cats. Or perhaps it wasn't such a surprise since she was the only feline he'd seen since landing on Jamaica. He peered around the container. A tall, thin, dark-skinned man with a crocheted red, yellow, and green hat topping greasy, disheveled braids used 2 thin bamboo sticks as he turned 6 fat birds over the flames inside a 55-gallon barrel that had been repurposed into a grill. By the time grease from fat splattered the man's silky purple shirt and coarse yellow pants, Xander knew which bird he wanted for dinner. The man with the matted hair and gaudy clothes kept looking out the wide open wall that separated his homemade grill from the sidewalk. When a well-dressed couple walked by, the cook shouted, "Best chicken in Jamaica, mon." Get used now. When the couple hastened by, he stepped onto the sidewalk and shouted after them, "You not wanna make da pretty lady cook tonight, do ya? Sure there must be better things to do." The couple walked faster. The man turned his attention back to the grill and turned each bird. Grease hit the coals with a sizzling splat that sent flames around the chickens. Xander glanced around the rest of the smoky room. The cook went through the same routine with the next couple. Having figured out the pattern, Xander whispered into Sharky's ear, "Wait for me in the alley." She gave him a skeptical look, but obediently moved through the broken wall. As the shaggy chef launched into his spiel for the third time, Xander moved with the lightning speed he was known for. As he ricocheted off the far wall, he snatched the closest bird off the grill. No sooner did his paws meet the dirt floor, but he veered behind the barrel and ducked back through the broken wall, where Sharky waited for him. "That was amazing." Her eyes shone. "He didn't even see you." Xander set the bird down between them. "Listen, he's still hollering at those people. That was the idea. Even if she might be a spy, it felt good to let her know what he could do if he wanted to. Eat up. I can't believe you got a whole bird." Her pretty pink nose flushed crimson. "I was going to see what I could find in the rubbish." She sank her teeth into a leg before she said more. After they were both stuffed, there was still meat clinging to the carcass, so Xander picked it up and carried it to where the closest dog lay curled near the alley. He laid it down, but the tan dog continued sleeping, so he shoved it close. The nose trembled. One jaundiced eye opened. Stealthily, Xander melted back into the shadows, then he moved out onto the sidewalk, tipped over the trash can next to the barrel-turned grill, and dashed back into the alley with the cook in livid pursuit. He ran past the dog, who was now gnawing the bird, and ducked under a cabinet before the man rounded the corner. The man skidded to a halt next to the dog and started screaming with fury. The dog growled a warning. The man kicked. The dog lunged. The man kicked again. The dog howled in pain. Xander twirled his whiskers, pleased with the day's work. "What I've heard about your fighting abilities is true, isn't it?" Sharky tilted her head to the side. "Depends on what you heard. Do you give everyone evasive answers?" He laughed and shrugged. "How come you seem to do dumb stuff sometimes, yet other times you're the smartest, quickest and most agile Tom I've ever known?" "What do you mean? You do dumb stuff like marking that breadfruit tree before you climb it, and a few other times I've thought you were going to trip over your own paws. Then you turn around and do amazing stuff like grab a whole chicken, and you're so fast and silent that we have time to dine before you frame that dumb dog." "Land sickness, I guess," he said with a dismissive shrug. "It comes and goes."